If I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times here lately, that people feel like the universe is broken, or the world is broken, or the country is broken. There's something wrong. There's something bothersome about the way life is turning out right now. What if I told you that was part of the plan? I don't, no, this isn't some conspiracy theory. It's actually how the system works. We've talked a lot about how our main battle, our main war is not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities in high places. Today, we're going to be talking much more about that and hopefully helping you to figure out and find some ways that you can disrupt those powers that be so that we can build the world that we actually want to see. So let's talk about disrupting unjust systems of authority today as we walk together down Creation's paths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a Christopagan druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christopagan druid and sous chef to the dog dial.
Today, we are going to be talking about that feeling that there's something wrong in the system, something that needs to be changed. And we're going to do it as a reaction video. We're going to be reacting to a video by Andrewism, which is a channel on YouTube that I highly recommend if you are not already watching it, called What Can We Do When the System Fails Us? It is a short video, 4 minutes and 41 seconds. Brian and I, we tend to talk, so I think our commentary is going to be a bit more than that, but this is a good overview of kind of what is actually going on and what we can, could, and should be doing about it. But before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever app you're listening to us on. We do 5 original Christopagan and Druid episodes Monday through Friday. And you know what, that's the thing. We got a lot of really exciting stuff coming up. All right, let's just get into it now, shall we? Okay, so Andrewism is a channel over on YouTube at youtube.com/@Andrewism, which is spelled the way you'd think it would be, Andrew ISM. It is a channel run by Andrew Sage that, as he says about himself, I want to learn and explore as much as possible. The channel really does a good job of that. Lately, the channel has been talking a lot about anarchist theory and what the world will look like beyond capitalism. I know both of those are buzzwords, and don't leave. Are you still here? Please tell me you're still here. Okay. So anarchism is not scary. We're going to be talking about it a little bit more in this episode. Anarchism is simply the thought that there is no such thing as a rightful ruler, that anyone who claims authority has to justify constantly and continuously why they should have authority, why any system of authority should justify its own existence constantly and repeatedly, and that we should only keep around the ones that really need to be there. Anything that is just there for power's sake, for greed's sake, for personal sake, are not good. That we need to be working towards a system that represents our individual liberties, our mutual support and betterment, and that association should be free and open and not forced or coerced. It is actually an argument in the philosophy against mandating that everybody bow to a king. Don't know why that's so much on my mind right now.
Yeah, nothing at all in the current news to make one think, maybe bowing to a king is a bad idea.
Yeah, no, nothing.
Nothing at all. The last 100 days.
Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing in the States in the last 100 days would make one question. Oh, boy.
I have been an adherent to this school of philosophy for a very long time, and my biggest problem with capitalism is it's not what you think it is. Capitalism is not being able to buy and sell things. That is a lie that has been told to you. Capitalism is about being able to be a venture capitalist, to be a stock trader, to be able to be one of those people whose money makes money and not people who actually make things for money. If you're somebody who makes things for money, you're not a capitalist. If you're somebody who makes your money by having your money make money through elaborate betting and gambling mechanisms that we call markets, then you're a capitalist. You're different.
Yeah, when you really get down to the heart of what actual capitalism is. It is an ownership mentality that easily slips into creating master-slave relationships,
Yes,
both with people and items.
it really is. It's an extension of feudalism.
It is an extension of feudalism. And the first thing I always like to remind everyone is that remember there are many, many subjects. Let's just say subjects to put a clear word on subjects in feudalism. There are very few that actually get to be the owner class. Very few. And so just from the odds, it's not a good system because odds are you're going to be one of the many that are the subjects and not the owner.
And if you want to understand how this system came about in the United States, as well as see some very good arguments against it, I highly recommend the writings of our president, Abraham Lincoln, who lived during the time when this was being constructed and wrote very passionately against it. Yeah, it's not that old. And good old Honest Abe was one of the people who was against it. Anyway, let's get into this video by Andrewism. It is titled, What Can We Do When the System Fails Us?
What can we do when the system fails us? When the prices of our necessities steadily climb beyond reach? When borders and business interests enclose the commonwealth of our planet and put its abundance at risk of scarcity? When compounding calamities threaten total collapse? I'm not saying the system isn't working. It is. It just isn't working for us. You and me. Common people with common interests in having our cares considered, needs met, and communities flourishing. The system is working just fine for the authorities over people and property. The capitalists, the rulers, all those who take by right from the fruits of our labor and the gifts of the earth.
This is the first thing to really think about here is the language that's being used. Because you'll notice this is language that you hear here. There are the common interests, the common people, the commons. This is not common as in like a royal calling people the commoners, though it does actually come from the same source and shows you what they think about the commons. The commons are the shared resources that we all need to survive and prosper.
The basic things like everybody should have water. Water is commons. The minute we allow someone to have ownership of water and water sources, that is really dangerous and problematic. It'd be like saying air. It'd be like saying someone has the right to own the air you breathe. Or another one of those commons.
So back in the olden days, there was this idea of common land. In fact, it's one of the things that's very prevalent around here. To this day in the American heartland where we live, it is very hard to get people to even try lamb because there were arguments over grazing lands between cattle farmers and sheep farmers. Because back in the day, there were common grazing lands. And if you do not respect the commons, then not everyone could use it. In fact, in England, there was initially a right to go and hunt on the common land, to forage on the common land. And these were eventually restricted so that these lands were owned by the royals and the nobles. You could no longer go on those lands without their permission, and thus you became more subject to their control. Because, after all, average people cannot be trusted to take care of a common shared resource. In some ways, I think that this shows where maybe some hierarchies are necessary in trying to figure out how much water you can take from a river, for example, for agriculture or for our cities. I think there are a lot of interests that have to sit at that table and be able to think about how are we pulling water out of this river? Because what we pull out of the river upstream won't be available downstream for others. How wise is it to build a city in the middle of a desert with that many fountains in it? Sorry, Las Vegas triggers me. When that water is being diverted away from land that is also used for farming and to keep people alive because we need water to survive. If you look at what's happened to the Colorado River, it is a tragedy because of the mismanagement of that resource. But that's because the people who are in charge of the resource are looking at it from the point of view of the businesses, those who are in authority, those who are in positions of power, and what they need rather than what the earth needs, rather than what the common average people need. Not having wildfires all the time, having water to drink, having food to be put on their table. These things are not being taken into consideration. And that's the main flaw that exists in this system, is that the system as we have it now is currently rigged to help the powerful and to help the wealthy and to keep them in those positions of power.
It really takes a shift in the mindset because, for instance, with the Colorado River, right now, a lot of that ownership mindset, the river is just a resource to be taken. If we could shift that to a commons mindset, that this is a resource for the entire community, something that needs to be nurtured and should have, yes, harvest can come from it, but should be allowed to grow and nurtured and taken care of with respect, where then the group in charge of that, maintaining those commons, yes, can be structured in a way, as Charlie said, with the needs in mind of the community, but also the needs of the resource itself to maintain it. It would be this corporate interest just trying to get theirs, and that corporate interest just trying to take theirs. And next thing you know, by the time you get far enough downstream, there's nothing left for anyone to take.
Yet we are looking at a system to help you understand this more personally. We are struggling. We are having problems with money. We're having problems putting food on our table, and we're having problems in the job market. The banks are doing fine. The large factory farms that are producing the eggs, they're doing great because they're raking in record profits right now because of how much they are overcharging for their product. So the system is working for them. It's just not working for us. And once you start understanding that this is a feature, not a bug in the system, it really does help you to understand what the actual problems are. Being mad at this politician or this celebrity or that billionaire isn't the problem. They may be causing direct problems now, but getting rid of that one cog in the machine does nothing to stop the machine from going on. They will be replaced with someone else.
This was part of the big problem of the push back in the 80s and into the 90s, where there was this huge push to privatize everything.
Yep.
And we were sold a lie about how it was going to be economically beneficial, when in reality, what they were doing was shifting the conscious, at least here in the States, having an understanding of healthcare is a commons issue and should be addressed from that perspective, to healthcare being privatized so that it could then have ownership. Literally, your health could be owned by somebody else, be beholden to them. If you need insulin, you are now a subject of the insulin lord.
Yes. The news used to be treated the same way, where they were required to have on people who had diverse opinions on things. They were required by law to do that. Most companies actually saw their news division as a loss leader, but as a public service that they were providing. Now, they're entertainment branches that are expected to bring in profits like any other entertainment branch within the organization. There is a distinct change in how we are seeing things. And again, the system is actually working, but it's not working for us because it is not designed for us. Let's go back to the video.
They shape the world as they see fit, and this is the result. Have you said thank you once? If we continue on our current course under their direction, our future is indeed quite bleak. But what if we didn't accept what is?
That is the question that we ask all the time. That is the magical question here, right? This is where magic actually comes in. What if you ask a different question? What if you don't accept life in the way that you currently have been given it? What if you disrupt it? What if you put in those glitches we talked about? What if you bring about this kind of change? And it requires a great work of imagination to think, what could we have instead?
Yeah, it really does. I was going to say, for instance, in the States, everyone's so upset about the electoral system to the point where a large percentage has just given up. They have no faith in it. It doesn't matter which party. And if they would only just ask the question of, what if that electoral system were different? What if we weren't forced to have to pick between a terrible choice A and an even more terribler choice B? And I know it's not a good word, but it's a bad, bad system. And I wanted to emphasize how bad it is with the jarring word like terribler. If we just asked, what if it was different? You know,
and every generation prior to ours has. This is the longest the United States, for example, since that's where we're broadcasting from, has ever gone without amending its constitution. We tried with the Equal Rights Amendment that men and women should be equal under law. It was a very simply worded amendment, but it could not pass because too many people lobbied that it would be dangerous if we legally defined women as equal to men. That would be dangerous. And by the way, how would it be dangerous? If you actually go back, if you want to understand why you are hearing all these things about queer people, about gays and lesbians and bisexuals and transgender people nowadays, it's actually because of the Equal Rights Amendment. The propaganda that was used against the Equal Rights Amendment was, if you define men and women as being equal, then we're going to give rights to the gay people. And we can't give rights to the gay people. So we shouldn't give equal rights to the women. Go back and look at the speeches that Phyllis Schlafly gave. Go back. Look at what Anita Bryant was saying. Go back. You can read, you can watch those speeches. They tied these two things together so that now it's gotten to a point where they have twisted the idea of giving queer people equal rights as dangerous to women. See, every idea has a story, and learning that story helps us understand where that idea came from. But yeah, instead of giving up on the system, our system is malleable. It is changeable. We could amend the Constitution and get rid of the Electoral College. We could amend the Constitution and change how senators are apportioned or elected. We've done it before.
This is why, like with the Electoral College, I like to challenge people and go, if it is one person, one vote, what if we actually did that? Because right now, the Electoral College, your vote doesn't equal one vote. We're voting for one person as a country. So it should be popular vote, because then everyone's vote equals one vote if we're all voting for one position for the presidency. The Electoral College ensures that isn't the case.
And by the way, we don't have to wait for Congress to do anything. The Constitution actually says that the states themselves can call for a constitutional convention. So we could, if we don't think that our Congress critters are going to do the work, we can actually start locally and get a local movement built up and make these changes. It's not about giving up. It's about actually doing the work. So Andrew is going to take us now on a kind of a meditation. So if you're not driving at the moment, take a moment and imagine a forest. Just get in your mind a forest and what a forest looks like, and it will help you through the next section of the video.
Take a walk with me through the forest. A healthy forest is a living mosaic of species that create an ever-changing community. While some trees seem to stand for eternity, the forest as a whole is in constant flux, as it faces disturbances of both human and non-human origin, from fires to floods to disease to insect blooms. With major disturbances come major opportunities, as the gaps where tree stands once stood offer full sun, fresh soil, and plentiful resources. Such opportunities are first colonized and crowded by fast-growing species that seek to take advantage of the ripe conditions. The pioneers. They consume resources and reproduce rapidly, outcompeting other species for the sake of their own growth and survival, in spite of the long-term consequences on the ecosystem as a whole. Their behavior is unsustainable, and once abundant resources become scarce, creating the conditions for their own demise. They've served their role, but their time is up.
Does that sound like what we're currently living through right now? We've had the disturbances, the pandemic, the market crashes that we've been living under. We've had the crises that have decimated and laid waste to everything, and now the opportunists are here, fast growing, apparently coming out of nowhere, eating up all of the resources, taking everything for themselves. The billionaires, the wealthy classes, the folk in the red hats. Does this sound familiar? Does it sound like what's happening? But something else is happening now. We can see the disruption in our own country. They've overstayed their welcome, haven't they? They've burned out, haven't they? Have you seen the size of the crowds in the streets now? The large protests getting larger every week for people that are working to get something for the people themselves. Yeah, that's happening, isn't it? We're seeing this transition that Andrew is talking about starting to happen right now. It's hard for us to see because we're living in this period, this early mover period where the grifters and all the opportunists have come in and are taking hold and taking what they can. But they're overstaying their welcome, and we're helping to show them the exit. Let's continue with the video.
The nutrients they've captured will lay the foundation for the next stage of succession. The plants that come next arise in difficult conditions for sure, but such conditions have created the opportunity for a different and concurrent strategy to competition: cooperation. If these successors intend to survive and become part of a mature forest, they'll need to engage in reciprocity with their neighbors. Instead of hoarding resources, they must circulate resources. Instead of acting as if they were independent, they must embrace their interdependence. Only then can they thrive.
Okay. So this is actually how forests actually work. Trees will gather the resources in the area that they're in, but then there are fungi, mushrooms, if you will, little mycelial networks that connect from tree to tree, connecting all of the root system. So if one tree is growing and there's not enough phosphorus in the soil, a signal goes out on the mycelial network. And if a tree has an overabundance, it will actually give some to the mycelium, and it will be carried over to the tree that needs it and given to the tree that needs it. That's astounding. We know that trees do this all the time. We know that a lot of the plants in the forest do this all the time. They signal each other about dangers. They help each other out. This is the way of sustainable nature. And we're seeing these first stirrings of interdependence arising now in us. That's why I'm bullish that change is coming.
It's also why so much effort is there to push community and interdependence. So that's what it takes. Some will have more, some will have less, but working together, the collective can have a lot more.
Yes.
This can be filled in plus extra.
All right, let's go back to the video.
This isn't really a story about a forest.
Nope.
We now stand at a precipice. We can continue to follow along the road to ruin paved by our rulers, or we can replace their world with one of our own making.
Let's do that instead.
How do we do that? The story of the forest was inspired by a section of Potawatomi botanist Robin Wall Kimmerer's The Serviceberry. She says,
the natural process of ecological replacement highlights two mechanisms at work in replacing a complex system that dominates the landscape and seems too big to change. Succession relies in part on incremental change, the slow, steady replacement of that which does not serve ecological flourishing with new communities. But it also relies on disturbance, on disruption of the status quo in order to let new species emerge and flower. Some massive disturbances are destructive, and recovery from them may not be possible. Other disturbances, of the right scale and type, create renewal and diversity.
This mirrors the twofold approach that I've discussed before. We need to oppose the system through confrontation and non-cooperation, and propose alternatives through promotion and prefiguration.
Oppose and propose. See, people often have one or the other, but they don't have both. Yes, we have to oppose the bad things that are happening, but we have to propose new ideas. And some of those new ideas are scary. Like when we talk about defunding the police, that scares a lot of people because they don't listen to the rest of the sentence. And maybe we need to get better about that. When I talk to friends about prison abolition, it's not that I believe that we should let everybody out and let all the criminals back on the streets. It's that prisons aren't actually helping society. In fact, they are making society worse. We see so much in the news today about gang violence and this gang and that gang and the other gang. But what they don't tell you is most of those gangs were created in our prison system. We took a bunch of people and put them in terrible conditions all together, and they plotted ways that they could collectively make their own lives better at everyone else's expense, and thus the gangs were formed. Yeah, that's how things actually work. And that's one of the reasons, not the only reason, that prison abolition is a good idea, that we should be working for other alternatives. How can people be reformed? How can we actually get any benefit out of this? Putting people into cages and encouraging them to form gangs is not actually helping any of us. But all of the gangs that you see on the news right now, all of them were formed in prisons. All of the ones that are being named right now were formed in prisons. So we can't just oppose, we have to propose. That doesn't mean that our proposals are always going to be exactly right or don't need modification, because no one is perfect. But we have to at least be putting forward those alternatives. Or what are we doing? You have to have another idea. You can't just say, no, not this. People will listen to you better if you say, not this, but maybe that, and be able to get your point across better. Let's go back to the video.
That means disrupting the systemic sources of harm around us and creating, as Kimmerer says, gaps, openings, and edges between the new and the dominant through alternative economies so that we may survive the status quo in the short term and topple the old system to thrive in the long term. Just remember that what's above the surface is only half the story. As one anonymous black anarchic radical put it, we also need to move like Mycorrhizae. There is work to be done underground. The world we seek to create may be called anarchy, a world without rule where autonomy, mutuality, and free association form the basis of our society. I say let it be. May our forests and meadows blow. All power to all the people. Peace.
And that's really the goal. That is the thing that we're working for. That's the thing we're working towards. A world where we're working for our own individual autonomy, where we're working for our mutual aid and benefit, and that we are building a world that is not coercing people into unjust and unfair hierarchies, telling us that some people were born to be rich and others to be poor, that some people deserve all of the wealth, even though they're not the ones doing the work. That is the calling that we're here for. That is the work that we're called to do. And for anybody who disagrees or doesn't understand that, read James chapter 5. This is your homework. If you don't think that these are biblical precepts, read James chapter 5 and tell me if your thoughts about billionaires doesn't change.
Along with that, this is something that everybody can do, at least the initial steps. And that is just as an individual, as like in the analogy, what we just heard, where do you want your roots to go? What do you want to share your nutrients with? And being mindful. In other words, bar shopping, when you're procuring, when you're spending your money on stuff, obviously you've got to stay within your means, and there's only so many options out there. But when you're faced with those options, taking a conscious effort to learn a little bit about who you're supporting with those dollars, what they are about, helping that to be part of that decision process. For instance, in the States here, I'm not going to name companies. Some companies are prevalent in most communities that are not good for the communities. There are other options that are better, at least than them. And so choosing to go there or not go to the bad one is one way, because then you are helping to support a company that at least puts some effort into those ethical choices, into those moral choices, those companies that maybe take better care of their employees, even if it's some little bit of things, just rewarding them for that.
But even in the smaller things that we can and usually are doing, it's being sure that we're there for each other. Some of the biggest things that we do in our coven is we have some people who are parents, and they are trading hand-me-down clothes amongst each other so that they don't have to buy all of that all over again, because, well, having children is expensive because they go through clothes really quickly through basic wear and tear, and because they're growing. And so those hand-me-downs become really handy and helpful and are something that we can provide for one another. We're constantly trying to share our skills, our talents with each other to help one another out. We're sharing our crafts. My hands were getting cold, and a friend of mine who's listening crocheted me a set of gloves. And then another friend of mine who is listening right now made another pair of gloves. And so now I have 2 pair of gloves because my husband stole my first pair. But they're fingerless gloves that I can use to still type and get my work done. But my hands don't get so cold in winter. I didn't ask for these, but they saw a need. They saw that they had the talent and the ability to fulfill that need, and they did. That's just basic instinctual mutual aid. And I think so many of us are doing that without doing the self-recognition that we're engaging in mutual aid, without doing that recognition that we are engaging in these kinds of activities when we are. So don't think that this is going to have to be a major disruption on your life. It eventually will be, because we're going to have to change some big things. But at least in this getting through and getting by phase, while we're figuring out the nature and contour of the big things, it's about taking some food over to a friend's house, making sure that we are cooking for one another, doing basic care and concern, wellness checks, making sure that we have safe harbors when we're having issues with our anxiety, which Lord knows, like, I think everyone's having anxiety problems right now. I don't think it's a coincidence that Dochi's anxiety is one of the big songs of the country right now, because I think everyone hears that song, hears the words to it, and goes, hey, that's me. I see myself. It's like a mirror. but taking care of each other is the first step. Opposing what we can oppose and being on the protest lines helps. But it's not just, as Andrew said, about opposing, it's also about proposing, figuring out those next steps. What replaces this? How do we make sure that the mistakes that we keep making don't happen again? For everyone who's upset about the current president of the United States, I want to remind you, we've done this before in the early 2000s. We did this also in the 80s. This is a repeated pattern. Every 20 so years, we go
through in the 60s as well.
Yeah. Go back to Richard Nixon. Yeah.
Go back to Richard Nixon. It's unfortunately a repeated pattern.
And before him, Truman. And
yeah,
we keep going back if you wanted to. You can go back to Andrew Jackson. We can go back to William McKinley. We can go back to a lot of, this is a repeated pattern. And when something is a repeated pattern that happens over and over and over again, maybe something's wrong with the system that lets that pattern keep repeating. And that's where we need to start asking ourselves, how can we change things for the better? I hope that you've enjoyed this. When I saw this video, I got really excited. I was like, this is everything that we've been talking about, but in 4 minutes. Because we're not good at doing the but in 4 minutes. We're talking about things. So I wanted to share it. I wanted to share it with all of you. If you enjoyed Andrew's content, I highly recommend the channel. Go to Andrewism on YouTube. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. It is a great channel. Love it so much. If you want more on anarchy, he has a lot of videos on anarchy and anarchism to help you out with that. I know that word is scary to a lot of people, but if you haven't noticed me using that term on this podcast before, I have, because I've been an anarchist for the majority of my life. All right. I would love to know your thoughts on all of this. If you're listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, or CreationsPaths.com, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say that you can leave a comment, they do not let us know, so we won't know. You leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to CreationsPaths.com, click on chat, and you can leave your comment there, and we will see it and be able to get back to you. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars you can pass our way, we offer monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am CE Dorset on both, and you can also support us through the Cash App hashtag CreationsPaths. Thank you to everybody who does that. You really help us keep food on our table, a roof over our heads, and the lights on. If you don't have any money right now, or you don't know if we're the kind of people you want to give your hard-earned treasure to, that is perfectly all right and understandable. But if we've said or done anything that's helped you out or you think would help out others, please share it with them, because that helps us out more than you could possibly know. And as we're heading out, I like to say a prayer. O great Queen of the hills, goddess of sovereignty, the Morg, we ask for your strength, your wisdom, and your guidance as we face down the great challenges to sovereignty that are happening throughout the world. We ask that you will guide us and guard us and help us to find the path through that leads to the path of prosperity and the path to prosperity and glory for us all. Amen.
Amen.